Right, good evening. Tonight's session is slightly different. It's not really a session. I'm giving back to you guys a little bit. I've had a handful of people contact me recently regarding deadlifts and like doing a deadlift tutorial. You guys maybe a couple of weeks ago will have seen me pulling 400 kilos for a triple. So I'm not a bad deadlifter. Now, deadlift is a really phenomenal exercise. It truly is my favourite exercise. But it comes with its ups, but it also comes with its downs. So the idea of tonight is I'm just going to do my best to sort of talk you through how I set up for a deadlift. And not just for myself, how I kind of, when I'm coaching people, how I get them to set up for deadlifts. Now, I'm blessed with the dimensions for the deadlift. I've got stupidly big hands and I've got a ridiculously long reach, which you can probably see out here, which is well over 80 inches. So I was just born to deadlift. But there are a number of you out there who have got lots of different dimensions. One of you guys, your name has just escaped me. I remember there were loads of numbers at the end of your name, at the end of your username. You were saying you were 195 centimeters tall, but you have got long legs and shorter arms. So, you know, maybe the deadlift, what you said, a conventional deadlift isn't suitable for you. So that's why you've got into sumo deadlifting, which I completely get. But all I'm going to do is kind of show you guys a few tips on how you can sort of set up. And also equally give you a couple of alternatives. Now, to start with, I am going to film from a few different angles, just so you kind of get an idea. To start with, what I like to do, and I'll show you from the front to start with, but I walk up to the bar, and then when I look down, and I've deliberately kept my nasty ugly feet out for you, I always run barefoot, but whatever. When I look down, the bar should be roughly halfway through my foot. So if I look down now, the bar is pretty much halfway. Now, I just know by feeling, I can literally set up with my eyes closed how I'm meant to deadlift. Now, what I then do is what I call hinge at the waist. So I keep my legs almost straight, not quite straight, almost straight, and I hinge just like that. So in terms of my hand width, my hand spacing, I always say to people, go where your hands naturally fall. Don't have them artificially wide, don't have them artificially close. Depending on your natural width, where do your arms naturally hang? And that is roughly where I tend to coach people and tell them to put their hands. So I'm going to start again. Step one, I literally walk up to the bar. As I look down, the bar should more or less cut my feet in half. I then hinge at the waist. So when I say hinge, I'm not bending my legs and doing any of that yet. I literally hinge like that. And as I'm doing that, I'm just reaching down. Now, I like an over-under grip. I like a mixed grip. Some people might like to use a hook grip. I personally have never liked hook grip. I found it way too uncomfortable on the thumbs. So I do a mixed grip. So I use an over-under grip. Now, because it uses like reverse friction, so the bar's twisting in one way, twisting in the other way, so they kind of cancel each other out, and it just gives you a slightly stronger grip. I also recommend using chalk. I use lifting chalk. Put it on, rub it in for about 20 seconds. Well, you don't even rub it in a little bit, shake your hands around for about 20 seconds, and it'll make you stick to the bar a bit more. So, but one more time, and I just lost my train of thought. So walk up, look down, halfway, hands naturally where they naturally fall, hinge at the waist, and I grab the bar. Right, now this is the next thing. What I then do is I try and drop my hips. So you'll see me now bend my knees. In the process of bending my knees, I'm dropping my hips, okay? So if you see me from the side, I'm gonna get that position. So hinge, and then I bend my knees, and I'm down here now. So you'll see that my hips are lower than my shoulders, because that is what we always want. Now, a lot of the time when people are using a maximal weight, what will often happen is their hips shoot up and then they move. But you're always doing your best to kind of keep your hips down and gradually drive through. So I'll walk up, feet in half, cutting the bar in half, hands where they naturally fall. Right, I'm ambidextrous, but I'm maybe slightly more right dominant than left. I use my dominant hand in the underhand position. That works for me. Whatever works for you, that's how I've always done it. Hinge at the waist, grab my bar, drop my hips, and now what I tend to do, some people like to sort of look up as they're lifting. I tend to keep my head in a neutral position, or actually sometimes I look down, but I find something to look at ahead of me in a sort of neutral position. So drop my hips, and then I find something ahead of me to look at. So at the moment I'm looking at the base of my camera, and then I envisage pushing my feet through the floor. Sounds really silly, but the feeling that you should get as the bar, what we call breaks the ground, like moves from the ground, is almost, just imagine having your feet on a leg press. You know, when you're doing quite a heavy leg press, but when you start off a leg press initially, just imagine having your feet low on the leg press, and if you've got your feet low on the platform on the leg press, you'll feel a lot of kind of quad activation. And I envisage almost like trying to push my feet through the floor, but it feels like the base of a leg press. And then I just follow through, I hold on to it, and I stand up. So walk up, hinge, drop my hips, feet through the floor, and then as I'm coming up, you'll see my head. So it starts up and it goes down. That works for me. Now I have a dead stop on the ground every single rep. So I don't want to ever do that. I used to do that and it hurt my back many times because I was young and I was dumb. But it's down, reset, feet through the floor. Down, keep the tension, feet through the floor. Down, keep the tension, feet through the floor. Down, keep the tension, feet through the floor. Okay. Now, that is essentially it. Mistakes I often see people make when it comes to deadlifting, and it can be to do with people's dimensions and things. Now, I often see people because they say, don't use your back, use your legs. Now, some people, and it may work for you, it's never worked for me, and I don't really do it with my clients. Some people straight away sort of get down there and they're so obsessed with like not using their back that they are like really squatting down and what have you. That may work for some people with their dimensions. I say most people, I don't tend to find it's all that effective. Often their knees get in the way or their shins get in the way or what have you. What I forgot to tell you about was foot spacing as well. I use a relatively narrow stance, and again I recommend for my clients, I get them to use a relatively narrow stance. So you think, because I'm a taller guy, I know the gentleman that was contacting me, he was 195, I'm not quite 195, but I'm just under 190, I'm 189, so I'm 6'2.5", so I'm a pretty tall person. So a lot of the time people would think, like when we're squatting, if you're a taller person, we tend to have a slightly wider stance, but I find that doesn't work on a deadlift, having a wider stance. Certainly with my dimensions, I find actually having a relatively narrow stance, so my feet are actually a little bit inside shoulder width apart when I'm doing it, if you actually look at my foot spacing. Now my toes, I have them more or less pointing straight ahead as well, so it's not out, not in. And what I always say to people is you want your knees and your toes pointing in the same direction. Whatever you are doing, have your knees and your toes pointing in the same direction. You know, if you're squatting, some people like to squat knees over toes with their forward, or I prefer to have my feet out slightly, more like that. But whatever's happening, my knees and my toes are always going in the same direction. So yeah, have a nice narrow stance. So one more time, I'm a teacher, so I have to get kids to repeat things over and over and over again, okay? So everything's nice and relaxed. Walk up to the bar, feet a little inside shoulder width apart or thereabouts. My toes are pointing forwards. Hands are going to go naturally where they naturally fall. Underhand grip with my dominant hand, overhand grip with my less dominant hand, although I'm ambidextrous. I hinge at the waist, so I'm not bending my knees quite yet. There's a little bend, but not like a proper bend. And then hinge at the waist, grab my bar, drop my hips. So I'll go from there, drop my hips to engage my quads a bit, and then I envisage pushing my feet through the floor, and I just hold on to the bar, and then I follow through. Yeah? Now, I'm doing this on an axle because you guys will probably be aware, I've moaned many times before. I had an Olympic bar and I bent it and it's useless, so I don't really use it anymore. So it's very difficult for you to see on an axle, and particularly I've only got 60 kilos on here for the purposes of this. But as you get a little bit stronger and you're moving a little bit more weight, depending on the quality of bar you're using, if you're in a commercial gym, by the time you start hitting 180 to 220, if you are that sort of breed of lifter, even to be fair, even 140, what will happen is on a kind of commercial Olympic bar, not a heavy duty Olympic bar or a powerlifting bar, but on a commercial bar, you'll start to feel the bar flex a little bit. So as you grab the bar, you will apply pressure, and then you'll feel the bar start to bend a little bit in your hands. And what I do is I say to people, take the flex out of the bar. Again, I can't demonstrate on this. This is a rigid bar, and my Olympic bar now. But as you put enough weight on there, you will apply some tension, and then the bar will start to flex. So I say to people, take the bend out of the bar, take the flex out of the bar, whatever you want to call it. So I'll apply that little bit of tension, and then I gradually increase the pressure. A common mistake people do that can hurt them, and I've seen a number of people hurt themselves, either jerk their back or potentially tear a bicep, is when they go to the bar. You won't be able to see my clothes with my t-shirt on at the moment, but when they go to the bar, rather than having their arms straight, they go down and they have their arms bent. Yeah, so it's more like this. So more like your arm more like that and completely locked out. So if you have your arm bent, as you're coming up, your arm is naturally going to straighten. 60 kilos won't do it. But when you're getting a little heavier, because what I say to anyone is, you want 100 kilos to look exactly the same as 200 kilos. 200 kilos as you get stronger should look exactly the same as 300 kilos. And I do my best to keep my form. Hopefully you guys have seen my 400 kilo deadlift that I did a couple of weeks ago. My form, of course your form breaks down when you're doing maximal weights, but my form isn't that dissimilar at 400 kilos to what it was when I was doing my warm-ups, from 60 to 100 kilos to 140 to 220 and all of the, or 180 to 220. My form is almost identical every time. The only thing is the bar will eventually slow down. But everyone will have a maximal breaking point. Everyone will have I've got a maximal breaking point somewhere or other. And that will be a point where you'll see, when from the side, I like my back to either have a tiny arch in it or for my back to be flat. I never want to round my back. Don't get me wrong, there are some times you're not going to die if you round your back. And you guys will also probably know I'm a big proponent of awkward lifts, like the Zercher squat, the Zercher deadlift. I do a lot of heavy medicine ball and carries and things like that. Because, there are times in the real world that we are not going to have the perfect form and things like that. So if your back rounds a little bit, it's not going to be the end of the world. You're not going to die. But what I would say, if you are doing that from rep 1, and your back is rounding over and you're like a cat arching its back, then I would say you're setting yourself up potentially for injury. So I'm not the form police by any means, but all I'm saying to you, and I'm not judging anyone or criticising anyone or laughing at anyone, I'm not one of those kind of channels, because I know there's a lot of that kind of gym fails channel. That's not me. Because I was young and dumb and made loads of mistakes over the years, and I hurt myself a lot over the years, lifting with form that wasn't optimal. And I just wish, I had someone to tell me. I had lots of people who trained around me, but they just didn't care. They didn't say anything. I wish I'd had someone to say to me, you know what, Mark, maybe, have a little arch in your back, flatten your back, or go a bit lighter, or whatever. Because I was young and strong and full of testosterone, and I was just, a kid who was strong and lifting with bad form. So when I say this, about arching your back as opposed to rounding your back, a lot of the time people round their back because the weight is a little bit too heavy. And as I said, when you're doing absolute maximal weights, I get it. If you are doing an 8 rep set or a 10 rep set, your form might break down a little bit, in the last couple of reps because, you're going for it. But if your form looks pretty shocking and you're rounding your back from rep number 1, then maybe you just need to lighten it up a little bit. The weight will come eventually. Take your time. I always say lifting is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Here I am 3 decades later, 31 years later, and I'm still, trying and achieving half decent lifts. You want to be in it for the long haul, and that involves staying relatively injury free. Just as I said, just learn from me. I'm just trying to help you guys learn from me, because even though I'm still pretty functional, I can still kind of go. I know the pain I live with on a daily basis, and that is just by not listening to my body and maybe just lifting with slightly dodgy form sometimes. Right, I'm going to stop the video here. I'm going to change the camera angle just so you can see what I am talking about, just from a slightly different angle. I'm giving you a Mark's eye perspective in terms of, I can only show, I'm holding the camera and filming, but as I walk up, so you'll see me walk up, and when I say my feet are cutting halfway across the bar, you can kind of see what I mean. If you look at my foot, it is approximately halfway across my foot. Now, some people like to deadlift and drag the bar up their shins. I did that for quite a few years, and I just managed to scar my shins, but it didn't make me a better deadlifter. The idea is that we keep the bar close to us, but if you have set up properly, as I bend my legs, you'll see that my shins almost touch the bar anyway. You want the bar to be as close to you as possible, but I've got scars on my shins from years and years of doing that. But I found over the years, I didn't actually need to have it dragging up my legs, because every single session my legs were bleeding and things. But I found slightly more optimal form, just simply by moving back half a centimetre or so. Okay, just trying it from a slightly different angle, hopefully you can see again. So, walking up to the bar, feet a little bit inside shoulder width apart, and you should hopefully from this angle be able to see that my feet are pointing forwards. Hands roughly where they naturally fall. Underhand grip for my dominant hand, overhand grip for my less dominant hand. I then hinge at the waist, grab my bar, and then I'm just looking straight ahead at the moment. Just looking, I can see my dumbbell rack, my eyes are sort of looking straight ahead. I now grabbed hold of the bar, feeling a bit of tension, and now I drop my hips. And as I drop my hips, my shins are kind of starting to make contact. In fact, they are making contact, pretty much. But then, as I stand up, the bar moves away, my knees get out of the way, and then I'm locked out. Now, as far as the lockout is concerned, I'm not a fan. Some people like to hyperextend. I used to do that and I found it hurt my back. So I just go until I'm standing up straight. When I'm warming up, I don't actually always even lock out. Sometimes I only go to about there. And I remember there was a great powerlifter many years ago called Stan Efferding, who was a wonderful world record holder, raw powerlifter back in the early 2010s. And he, when he was warming up, never locked out. And I remember he would physically stand still, but he wouldn't lock out. He would just, until he was going through his optimal weights. So I find that kind of works for me. So I never hyperextend. So when I say hyperextend, I mean, like kind of arch. I only ever go until I'm standing up straight. It just I used to find it like used to compress my vertebrae, because if you've seen some of my videos before, you'll know I've said I've got a permanent bulging disc, and it used to aggravate me tremendously. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but it doesn't work that well for me. Right, one last time, and then I'll show you a couple of other tricks. If you're someone that wants to support your deadlift. Right, walk up, shoulder width apart, under over, bend down, hinge, grab, drop my hips, feet through the floor, stand up straight. And then you'll see my head position. I go from looking straight, so my head is straight and my chin drops. There are some people who like to look up, so I've got a TV in front of me. There are some people who like to look up, and they finding something up there helps them. Matter of personal preference. It's never really worked for me. It might work for you. So I'm not saying don't try it. Training is all about experimenting. I can tell you what works for me, and I can give you a rough idea, but I've given you a few tips here that, bar's moving, and a few ideas that might help you out. Try them out. Experiment with your hand spacing. Experiment with your foot spacing. You might want to have them a tiny bit wider. You might want to have them a tiny bit closer. But definitely grabbing the bar, hinging, then dropping your hips, it really does help. Because some people walk in and try and drop their hips straight away, and I just find that it doesn't put them in the optimal position, because in the process of dropping your hips, it causes you to kind of engage your quads and get a bit of tension there, and then you can push and follow through. Yeah? Right, I'm going to now grab a couple of bumper plates, and these are a couple of tips that I find help guys who are, maybe slightly shorter levered. Right, okay, cool. Set up. This is an exercise that I find helps guys whose arms are maybe a little bit shorter. Now, I've just grabbed a couple of bumper plates here, a couple of 20 bumper plates that I've got hanging around in my gym. I'm not saying you need to use plates as thick as this, but if you are someone that finds it quite difficult to basically get into position without compromising yourself and sort of rounding your spine, unless you're a competitive powerlifter. So, if you're a competitive powerlifter, you need to get used to pulling from the ground. What I tend to say to people is just elevate the plates a little bit until you can get in that position. As I said, I am blessed with incredibly long arms. These are my knees. When I lock out, my hands are there's my knee. You can see where my knee is. My hands are just above my knees at lockout. So I've got ridiculously long arms. Some of you might find that your arms are up here when you lock out. So you've literally got about another 2-3 inches to pull than I have. So in that instance, in order to get yourself in the optimal setup, I just say to people, get a plate and elevate your bar an inch or two. And as I said, I've just done it for the sake of speed. I've just grabbed a couple of bumper plates. It doesn't have to be as thick as this. It can be, a couple of the thinner plates, whatever. It could be a couple of 5 plates, but just elevate it just enough to get yourself in optimal position. So if I was a shorter lifter, the way I'm going to represent it and show you guys is, you can see I can get in optimal position just by reaching down and like this. But there are some people, because their arms are shorter, they have to literally bend. So when I bend down, I can reach the bar and still be upright and safe. But if you're, just imagine my arms were shorter. Okay, I'm going to up my arms a little bit. Look how much further I have to reach. Yeah? So in order for me to get the bar, so rather than being down here, just imagine my arms were 3 inches shorter. In order for me to touch the bar, what am I having to do? I'm having to bend over more, aren't I? So in order to eliminate that problem, all I simply do is just bring the bar up a little bit. So I'm going to keep my little short dinosaur arms here now, okay? So rather than having my lovely long gorilla arms that I've normally got, I'm going to pretend I've got little short arms. So I'm going to put them up here a little bit. And now I'm going to get to the bar, but look, here I am. I'm able to lift safely. So with the plate elevated, with it elevated on the plate, I'm able to get in position and still keep my back pretty flat, because otherwise I would have had to, just one more time, if I've got shorter arms, then in order for me to get to the bar, what am I having to do? I'm having to round my back and get into a nasty position. So the gentleman who was contacting me saying, you know, the 195 gentleman, you know, you were saying even though you're 195, your arms are a little shorter. That's probably why you feel a little unsafe. So what I would say to someone like you, unless you are literally competing in powerlifting. Now I know you were saying you were following the Candido, powerlift, what's his name? Candito? I know exactly who he is. Anyway, you were following a powerlifting program. You know, it's really appealing to you. So I don't know if you're planning to compete in powerlifting. If you are, fair enough, you're just gonna have to suck it up and figure out a way to pull from the ground. But equally, if you are, and I know you're doing sumo anyway, so you can compete using sumo. But if you are wanting to try and use conventional and stay safe and you're not competing or anything like that, then I would simply say just elevate the plates a little bit. Now, if you are someone who struggles with different points of the deadlift, there are the best exercise, I would say, overall, in terms of as a form of deadlift, is actually the deficit deadlift. If you're someone that really struggles with lockout or you struggle with drive from the ground or whatever, deficit deadlift is an absolute must. Not if you've got shorter arms. This is for guys with slightly longer arms and proportions that are a little more like mine. So I'll just show you using this lovely plate. It teaches you how to get into position and it teaches you how to stay tight. So now, because of the width of the plate, I'm actually having to take a slightly narrower stance than I ordinarily would, but you can use 2 plates. I prefer to do it on 1 plate rather than 2 plates, but my feet are a little bit narrower than that, so they're a little bit inside shoulder width apart. In fact, probably a couple of inches inside shoulder width apart. But I still use the same process, but it teaches me how to use leg drive and how to stay tight. So I am bending over, but my back now, from the side, you can see, I'm in a much more compromised position to start with. I'm not completely compromised, but whereas in a normal deadlift, I'm able to lift from here, now I'm having to bend over a lot more. Okay, but I can still reach the bar, bend at the waist, same process, drop my hips, feet through the floor, stand up. Absolutely exactly the same process, but it teaches you to stay tight. It teaches you to stay in that tight position, and it teaches you how to drive your feet through the floor. And again, remember that mental cue the whole time. Push my feet through the floor. It should feel like imagining having your feet really low on a leg press, like on a 45-degree leg press, and just pushing from there. And the 45-degree leg press with your feet low is a great way. Well, I say 45-degree leg press, it can be any leg press, but I use the 45-degree leg press. It's a great support tool from a leg workout point of view for your deadlift. Absolutely. Now, I've got lots of other exercises that I do for support. So what I'd like you to do is check out the channel, because I've done quite a few videos on a range of exercises that I do. So I use obviously the deficit deadlift, T-bar rows to the ground, pen lay rows, chest supported rows. Those are my real go-tos. So when I do my back support workout, my deadlift support workout, should I say, excuse me, I tend to use 2 to 3 of those. Normally 2, to be honest with you. So it might be a deficit one day and a pen lay row. It might be a pen lay row and a T-bar row. It might be a T-bar row and a chest supported row of some kind or another. Now when I say chest supported row, that can be either a seal row or it can be like a bench supported row of some kind or another. But those are exercises I dip into very frequently. Those are genuinely how I support my deadlift, because it just attacks different parts of the back and just helps strengthen those particular areas. When you're doing like a pen lay row, it's that initial explosive drive off the ground, similar with a T-bar row, because I do them from the ground, generally speaking. When I'm doing more of a bodybuilding workout, sometimes I'll do them at 45 degrees, but if I'm perfectly honest, nowadays I do the majority of them when I just parallel to the ground and explode, parallel to the ground, explode, parallel to the ground, explode. If I'm doing 45 degrees, I tend to do it if I'm doing more of an upper back type of workout and trying to get some lower trap work going. But again, just a great exercise. So hopefully that has answered a few questions and queries. What else is there? Another thing that can help, I don't do it all that much nowadays, but something that I really used to do, particularly when I was kind of moving from that mid 300s to the higher 300s to that kind of 400, something that really did help me as well with bands, pulling against bands, that can help you. So you can do something as simple as sort of, let me just grab a band and demonstrate. I'm just going to get a light band for the purpose of this. It can be something as simple as putting the band over, standing on it, make sure when you're standing on it that you're standing and it's halfway through. This is an optimal, standing on it and then just locking out. This is a very light band, but as you lock out, you'll get more tension on the band. Now, that's one way of doing it. Obviously you do it with a much heavier band than that. I'm very lucky because I've got a good quality powerlifting rack and I've got band pegs that I use. So I will set it up in the rack and pull against the band pegs. But that's another really good one. You can also overload it by throwing on chains so it gets heavier at lockouts. So it's basically accommodating resistance. Lighter at the bottom, heavier at the top. Some people also like to do rack pulls. So the idea of a rack pull, you would set it up in a power rack and you put it around mid-shin and you'd pull from around mid-shin. Now over the years, the exercise got bastardized. And then you had people pulling like from above the knee, and I was never a big fan of it. If it works for you, cool. I tried it, it didn't really ever work for me. I'm not a rack pull fan, to be honest with you, but I do appreciate that it might work for some of you guys. So I'm just giving you a few more options if you want to. If you're someone that really struggles with lockouts. And what rack pulls are quite good for is just getting you used to holding and handling slightly heavier weight, because of course all of us are much stronger at the top than we are at the bottom of the movement. Aside from that, I think that is pretty much it. So hopefully you have found that useful. If I do think of anything else, I'll probably mention it in another video, but hopefully you found that useful. Right, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, hit notifications and all that good stuff. You guys take care, and I'll speak to you soon.